often say quite proudly, which always surprises me, that, oh God, I really overthink. And this is one of those phenomenon that really sort of like so many other things in life, it really depends on the degree of thinking that we do. Certainly one recognizes obvious merits of thinking a certain amount. You preempt certain things, you can plan better, so on and so forth. But there's a thin yet significant line between thinking and overthinking, which can then really go into quite a spiral and have a rather negative and profound impact on one's mental state. Today is all about that tendency that we seem to be becoming more and more prone to, given how many pressures and expectations that we contend with in contemporary life. I think many of us at some point during our days do tend to overthink, overanalyze, over worry about specific facets of our lives or certain events that are going on. Joining me today is Ishita Roy. I'm really happy because the suggestion for this very important theme itself came from her. Unfortunately, she's somebody who's been at the receiving end and has suffered on account of overthinking herself. But for selfish interests and for the interests of this dialogue, that puts her in a uniquely insightful position to actually talk about it, perhaps where it comes from, why it happens, what it can lead to, and maybe even how to prevent it. Ishita is somebody who is a creative entrepreneur. She, after a very rewarding stint in hospitality, from what I've understood, is now the co founder of her own agency, unsurprisingly called Kali. And I'm always very happy when people technically unconnected with mental health agree to these dialogues, because that's really at the heart of what we're trying to do, is to get everyday people to weigh in on this discourse. So I'm really happy and really privileged she's made the time. Ishita, thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is all mine.
So, Ishita, before we dive into the murky waters of overthinking, I would love for you to tell our audience a little bit about your agency and what kind of work you're doing nowadays.
Okay, so I am the co-founder of Calligraphic Studio. Like you said, we have the Kali in our name. And at the moment, we are catering to lifestyle and hospitality brands. So we are basically a marketing and PR agency. We also do, photography and videography as well. So luxury photography is also a part of our portfolio. We take care of the end-to-end brand requirement, brand marketing requirement, be it the SEO, the website, and how the campaign strategies and everything. So that is what we are doing at the moment.
Wonderful. It sounds like great work, but it also sounds like work where one would be compelled to overthink. But we won't get into that.
So trust me.
Um, tell me, tell me broadly speaking, I know it's a very vast and open-ended kind of question, but um, what are some ways in which you have observed the tendency to overthink can become a problematic issue?
Overthinking in itself is a problematic issue. Because there is no end to it. There is no, there's overthinking makes you forget that there's an end to that cliff, and beyond that edge of that cliff, there is a deep dive. Overthinking makes you forget that thin line or that cliff edge. It makes you forget that because that's where you start spiraling. So if I say that, there are certain only instances where you overthink, no. Imagine something I'll tell you. Okay, so maybe I can tell you an example from my school days.
Sure.
One of the days I forget to bring my homework to the school. Okay, something which happens to all the kids, and something which is natural. Now, for an overthinker, that is an opportunity because even if they are not trying, their brain will lead them to that edge of that cliff and push them there from there. Because then he is thinking, okay, I didn't give my homework. I am not going to pass. If I don't pass, what happens to my parents? If my parents are angry with me, what happens to me? Am I losing myself? Did I do something very wrong? Okay, I have done something very wrong. My friends will not talk to me. You can see the like the one cord how it connects to
Yeah,
the
so it's
other.
like a
They're
domino
not very.
effect.
Yes, it is very much like a domino effect. They might not be very practically related to each other because when an overthinker actually lays it out, you understand that they're not practically related to each other. A kid not talking to me does not mean the destruction of the world, but for a spiraling overthinker, it is like that's it. That's the end of me. I have done something wrong in the last 24 hours, which I'm unable to recollect, and that is why that other child is not talking to me. So
So
that's
it just
how
in order to understand this in sort of very simple layman's terms, it might be fair to say perhaps that um, uh, quite often divorced from reality, it is really a series of highly exaggerated worst case scenarios.
divorce from reality, no. But yes, highly exaggerated worst case scenarios. Because it is very much rooted in realities. All these possibilities are real. But
But
the
the
assumption
probability is very
or the
less.
suggestion that probability of all of them coming together just at once, that's unreal.
Yeah.
But it's very real that it might
True,
happen like
but I
this, it
mean,
might
going
happen
back
like
to
that.
your own very beautiful and relevant example of forgetting one's homework and coming to school,
Yeah, yeah,
I think in most of those scenarios, the student would get a little reprimand in class, and it would end with that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And like, if I am sitting in a class and somebody is not talking to me, how is that connected to anything? That person does not know me, so he's not talking. But just because the tendency is there to think and connect the dots without the dots being there, so then that's when you start, okay, he's talking to that person, all the other people I know, but not talking to me. Maybe it is intentional. So you're connecting dots without even having the need to do it. So that's how the overthinking
Before
ball runs.
we talk a little bit about possibly, some factors or reasons that compel specific individuals to become this way, I definitely want to ask you that while you gave that very relevant example, it is in the larger scheme of life a very innocent example
Yeah.
from a certain age and stage where really it wouldn't make that big of a difference. As we grow older and we are in more, let's say, responsible roles as adults, etc., how can this a degree of overthinking and exaggerated thought process start to become a real impediment in terms of functioning to one's full potential?
It does. Because I'll tell you what, when you're young, it's the decisions there do not have a lot huge consequence. The consequence level is much lesser, but once we are growing up, the consequence is definitely higher, heavier, I would say. So, if like when I started working, when I had to start taking decisions of my own, maybe now there'll not be every day cannot be a good day at the office. There'll be some good days, some not so great days, some very bad days. The good days are never a problem. The not so good days can be a bit of a problem, but still you can manage. Once you start getting through this, you start to manage. You start to understand it, how to avoid it or how not to think about it. It's the bad days where it becomes a problematic situation to even function. I remember in the initial phase of my career, I remember I had goofed up. Very simply, I had goofed up. And this is, I'm talking about back in 2015 something, 2015, 16. I was doing my internship, very simple goof up about, forgetting a client detail and everything. It's a very small thing. Now, all these years later, I understand that, it's a very small thing. Any intern can do it. It can happen to any intern. But the thing was, for the next 15 minutes, I had possibly lost my my entire capacity to think, my feet and hands had gone like terribly cold because I was not thinking that just goof up and I need to tell my manager about. I was thinking that I failed myself. It's a huge leap of assumption. And for the next 15 minutes, I had to take that period of time. I had to isolate myself to get out of that tremendous spiral, which I had because in my mind I had failed. There was no in between. I had actually done a mistake and failed. There was no done a mistake can rectify. It took me that 15-20 minutes to just be in that cliff. Then I realized, okay, you know what, I'm spiraling. I need to connect with somebody now. An overthinker for the better part of it. The only way we can stop a spiral is to ask for that help,
Hmm.
or at least have that kind of I call them Voldemort used to keep his
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
those Horcrux. So I call them my Horcruxes. So have Horcruxes, have your Horcruxes in your life, have different Horcruxes in your life. Latch onto them when you're in that spiral. They will pull you out. So I remember I latched onto my Horcrux. My parent, my father, and I'm very close to him. So I called him up immediately. He was like, what is this? This has happened. I'm spiraling again. I'm thinking this, and everything is a possibility right now. So my parents had to guide me back. At that moment, they were that Horcrux. But every time your Horcrux is also not there.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not possible every time to have that channel of help out there. So once
absolutely.
I transitioned into a more professional setting, this problem became way more, I'll say, evident or nerve wracking because I would spend nights awake.
Wow.
One presentation gone wrong, and I am thinking about that one singular presentation for the next 72 hours. Maybe a colleague I was unable to connect with. That's a very small thing. In the larger scope of the things, doesn't matter at all. And maybe I ended up saying something, or they ended up saying something, which was not very required, I would say. And suddenly I'm thinking about that same thing for the next 24 hours because especially when you're living alone, especially it becomes that much more difficult if you're living alone because then there's nobody to stop you and get you out of it. So this, when I saw it happening, I realized, okay, that impediments your way of functioning at the moment because I was not sleeping. I was awake. I was unable to, my mind was unable to rest, if I can say that. I wanted to rest. My mind was unable to switch off. It was on a spiral of, possibilities. Okay, this is happening, that is happening, that is happening. Everything is happening till
But
the time it becomes physically a problem because
But you know,
it is
through
very
that
much possible.
example, you've brought up a couple of very, very critical points, I feel, and I'd like to take a minute and share something from my own life in terms of this. Not only does one or can one become physically non-functional, it also calls into question one's identity, competency, and so many other things. And now
Absolutely,
I
yes.
remember straight out of film school, I was working as an assistant director on my first film. And on set in the morning, DOP yelled at me really, really badly in front of everybody, Bengali gentleman. And I loved him to death, and so did he, which is why it was an even bigger shock. And from the time that shout happened until rap that evening, I was zonked. And I was like, "That's it. I've not even begun, and I'm never going to make it," and all kinds of things. And speaking of different things that sort of bring you back to reality, I went to him with
Hmm.
some difficulty. I mustered the courage and went to him after rap that evening, and sort of asked him politely what the hell happened, and the man genuinely had zero recollection of what I was talking about. And then he
Yeah,
said, "Listen, buddy, even if what you're saying happened and is true, the fact that I don't remember it means that this is absolutely nothing personal. Things are
yeah,
heated. Film sets are that way. There's a lot at
yeah,
stake, and it's just that, and it's confined to that." And that's what sort of made me get that reality check. So it's but having said that, for the duration those that self doubt comes in, it can be really really testing. And that's actually a good segue for us to talk a little bit about reasons, because also what we've observed, and behavioral people and people who study sociology, etc., that in India, in South Asia by and large, things such as mistakes and failing at a task are really, really frowned upon, perhaps much more than the West. We take it
Yeah,
as a absolute no-no, and almost a reflection of that individual's entire being if you failed at one particular task, because we seem to be unable to separate the person from that one singular pursuit.
yeah,
um, so,
definitely is.
what do you think some reasons may be that people become prone to this kind of overthinking? Do you think it's a genetic predisposition? Do you think it's, what is it?
I think it's a mix of both. So, okay, like you said, you had one such incident where somebody yelled and you felt that despair. Now imagine going through this kind of an emotion in every relation, in every on the world. You will develop a certain amount of panic, a certain amount of anxious or overthinking, a certain amount of maybe not being very good towards yourself, self-loathing, I might
Yeah.
term it as. And if I say this is just an acquired situation, and I'll be practically wrong. What I have observed over the years is overthinking in itself is such a paradox that it's not just inbred. Like, there's a condition. I can't say that it is just socio condition. It is a part of it is also genetic. You family members. Because see, there has not been a lot of information or conversations about personalities, about the kind of sensitivity a person carries within themselves in the last couple of decades. Post independence, the generations that they were there, they were so much busy in surviving. Survival was so necessary that it was impossible to talk about, what is the sensitivity requirement,
Right.
what
So
is
I
the kind
think
of
the quality of that
uh,
survival didn't even come into the picture.
yeah, exactly, exactly. There was no conversation about that. There was either you man up, chin up, or you get, drowned.
Yeah.
Pre-independence, it was about getting to that point, and post-independence was about rising
True.
from that point. This entire conversation came, I think, after 1980s, if I may say, this thing started showing its consequences. The genes had started questioning. So if I say that yes, I have seen. Later, I realized the members of my family tree. I realized there what I used to think about them being constantly, encumbered with certain tasks. Like why are they repeating it? Why are they suddenly? Why do they have this habit of repeating the same words? Later, I realized it was their expression of overthinking. They were also thinking,
Hmm.
overthinking. They were going through that phase, but they did not know, had no access to knowing.
Yeah.
And I was carrying those genes. The social condition just, kind of triggered it. And a huge part of that is not, I will not say current, but yeah, a few years back, the school system, the school education system that is, I would say still that is there. A huge part is played by the education system. See, there are good, those leeway education systems which are focused on the personality development of the kid and everything. That's very good. Those are one type of schools. But there's a larger type of schools which are just focused on studying.
Yeah, yeah, that
On
is the vast
studying,
majority.
yeah, exactly. Basic studying, pass, fail, yeah, can do, cannot do, and a little bit of extracurricular activities, which is not just extra. That is maybe a slight, lifeline for that kid. But to the school, it's just an extracurricular activity.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, there, if the kid is sensitive or if the kid is emotional or like he hyper sensitive or something like that, there's no extra tool available either for the kid or for the teachers or for the guardians to identify and to help that child with that. Because either just You need to pass in certain subjects. And you did not pass, you fail. You did
Hmm.
not get the ranking, you're lagging behind. But what is at the middle of these two conversations? What happens to that child is there's not a lot of focus on it. And that conditioning, I think it kind of festers
Hmm.
slowly. I won't say it overnight, it slowly festers. Maybe once, no, it doesn't happen. Twice, child starts thinking, okay, maybe I have that tendency. Thrice, he's looking for excuses to miss school. That's when it's a red flag. Why is the child looking? Nowadays, it's a conversation. Why, if the child doesn't want to go to school, ask the child what happened. But earlier, it was not a
Yeah, yeah,
conversation.
absolutely. I
If
mean,
a
this is
child
a
doesn't
very,
want to
very
go, send him.
recent woke phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly. But earlier, it was not. Earlier, it was it's, a child doesn't want to go, send him. However, you can send him to school.
Yeah.
But the excuses that keep piling up, that's the child overthinking in itself. Now, when I'm looking back as a third person, I'm in the bird's point of view, I can understand that okay, the younger me was, at that point of time, which I was thinking that I was being dramatic. No, I was overthinking, I was spiraling, and that's why I was looking for these excuses to suffice myself to say that I'm not in the wrong exactly. That's when it starts, and then obviously these conditions, these expectations, we have very rigid expectations. We still, I won't say everything has changed. You are expected to be okay. Let me give you a very easy example. From a very larger point, Bengali people are expected to have larger eyes, isn't it true? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean that too. I
Bengali,
mean
like, yeah.
there are stereotypes galore. I mean, it's a community that's expected to do at least their PhD. Everybody in every household will be, in
So what?
some
Yeah,
artistic
exactly.
pursuit. So many are there.
So what happens to the kid who doesn't have large eyes,
Yeah, it's a
big
huge
eyes?
pressure. Yeah.
Now this is not happening by the family. This is not being said by the family. Maybe the family doesn't even care. The kid has eyes. Family is happy. But that general expectation, which is
Right.
might not be worded out at every point, but somehow looming over the mind of that child, that has its effect. And
Absolutely.
it's there in the school. Like I'll tell you from my state because it's easier for me to give
Naturally.
you the example that a child born in Bengal will always have taken a singing class, dancing class, or something else, arts class. What happens to the kid who is not into those classes?
Yeah.
They know the Bengali child. Now, this is when they are getting when they are getting exposed to such thinking stereotypes. This is
Yeah.
not just okay. This is a formative years. This can have some amount of effect, but that's reversible. That is still reversible. But if we don't address it, we don't recognize, identify, or come up with the horcruxes to help it. What happens once a child becomes an adult? Because then they are responsible for others. They are responsible not just for their own thoughts, they're responsible for thoughts of others. Then it is very difficult to come back from that cliff.
True.
There, after what I've realized is after an age, maybe 16 or 17, everything becomes a reason. Like you said, that what are some of the reasons? Everything becomes a reason. Because obviously the world is way more complex. Once you start on that journey, you realize, like, the sepia tones of the schools are over. The world is way more complex. And these complexities, they are just like, that freshly uncapped landmines. Everyone is each of them is a trigger. So
Well,
yeah, if you ask me,
you
that's
articulate
what
that
I
very,
think.
very insightfully, unsurprisingly, but you also mentioned reversing or correcting, remedying. I understand and appreciate that no one size fits all. Some people go it alone, some people seek traditional psychotherapy, others other modalities. What do you feel is might be an effective way of addressing this sort of severe propensity to overthink and perhaps I don't know, controlling it or managing it a bit better?
You can have 100 ways of treating it. 100 ways of treating it. There is psychotherapy, talking to somebody, everybody, because the intensity is different. But there's one thing common. No matter what you choose, before that, there is one step that every overthinker has to become. They have to accept themselves.
Of course.
That is essential. They accept themselves. I had to accept myself that, yes, I have this propensity, I have this intensity, and it's not wrong.
Hmm.
The accepting part is there, but the harder part is understanding that this doesn't make me wrong, this doesn't make me weak, and this definitely doesn't make me guilty. That is the part, is that as a part of it, the journey, that's the first step, stepping stone is there.
Yeah, but
From there on,
I
the
think you'd
journey,
agree that it's a very hard step because
it is one of the
culturally
most difficult.
and our conditioning is that, oh, tum to defective ho.
Yes, exactly. I will very much second. For a very long period of time, I remember that my thought process was also similar. That that's this is something that I have to carry with myself, or this is something that it's a part and parcel and everything. But there was this guilt attached to it that it's a part and parcel which is making me less. There was no
Hmm.
acceptance of that thing that it's not part, making me something less. It's making me something more observant. Okay, an overthinker are usually people who are way more observant because they are picking up on the subtler emotions. They're picking up on the anger or on the they are picking up on your physical cues. Why is he overthinking? It's not just they're like they are suddenly on a vibe because their mind is picking up on the cues that generally people miss.
Sure.
The
But that
squinching
makes
of the
sense. I
eyebrows.
think they are very nuanced observers and they will
Yeah,
likely have slightly higher IQs and all of that.
yeah, because so a kid when he's seeing his teacher squinching his eyebrows while seeing the homework copy and he's overthinking, okay, I've done my year wrong. Half the time the child is not even looking at the teacher. Nah, they're not even bothered. What
Yeah.
teacher, where teacher? But that one kid who's looking at the eyebrows and understanding that something might be going on. They're picking up that on that physical cue. So an overthinker is essentially an observer, a huge observer, and that's what I later realized that I was observing things which were not even meant to be observed. That is where I was spiraling from. So if I'm observing things, I cannot be always a wrong person. That means there is something right to me. That difference of understanding is where the journey of, I'll say, getting help begins. It's all about getting that. I think it's all about becoming yourself, not even getting help. It's all about becoming yourself.
But
Journey of
also,
becoming.
tell me, I mean, this brings up a slightly unrelated but allied nonetheless point of inquiry, which really intrigues me because there would be so many, I don't want to say jobs or vocations, but let's say one is a very passionate artist or a painter. There would be so many areas and pursuits of life where an extremely deep sense of observation would be hugely helpful. So, how do you then stop it at observation and not let it convert into sheer paranoia?
Have you seen Da Vinci's the paintings? Have you
Hmm.
seen his work? Da Vinci was an overthinker,
Yeah.
wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was overthinking. Now his overthinking led him to understand, to become mad, paranoid about what goes on inside the body, what is happening and everything. But that's the level of his overthinking. There was this poet. I am not remembering his name. He had gone blind. Lord Byron, I suppose. Lord Byron.
Hmm.
He had later in his life he has gone blind, and he had started getting paranoid, overthinking about it. Because how will I write now? How will I continue to be who I am? And some of his most beautiful pieces of written words, his poetry, are after
Hmm.
he lost his vision because he connected with the cosmic, the divine that is there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So if I say by vocation, which is can be difficult for an overthinking, every vocation is different. Every as simple as I think apart from daily masonry, because but even then that thought process might be there that I did not count my bills right. But yeah, every vocation, because it's not about the vocation, it's more about if that person is passionate about it, they are bound to overthink it.
Hmm.
I have an agency today, but I still overthink a lot. I still have the tendency to go on a full bound spiral. And my partner, my business partner, she has to take that initiative to get me off. That's why I'm in a partnered business. I can't do it by my own.
Well,
So
let me
that's the
let me
first
just say
rule book.
that uh, it's wonderful. This is the best kind of interaction because not only are you deeply well informed about the subject, but we've had this conversation in such a easy, light way, and I think that is the way to have these
Yes.
conversations. Otherwise, it becomes very preachy and dense and heavy. So really, I mean, all credit to you. Thank you for making the time
Thank you so
and
much.
chatting with us, and all the
Thank you so
best
much.
with all of your endeavors. And I hope that your thinking stays at bay.
Yeah, definitely. I hope so too. And thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
letting me be a part of this journey.
My pleasure.